rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. And thank you for the follow, the latest follow. Let me see who this is. MDC6802D just started following like 10 minutes ago. Anyway, thank you, of course, to all of my followers. I do appreciate every single one of you. And I just realized, hang on, I got to get the book. Hold on. Oh, I'm just like all sort of discombobulated tonight. I don't know why. I'll blame it on Mrs. Whiskey. How about that? Anyway, I got to find where I am here. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I mean, let's just face it. Apparently, the blow up in the Oval Office has taken up a lot of the news media's time. So, of course, we're going to be covering a little bit of that tonight. A little bit, a lot, whatever, of it. And yeah, it's just amazing to me how many people, in terms of the Americans, are getting bent out of shape. Mostly the left. They're getting bent out of shape because of the conversation and the tone, the tact that was taken. But what they don't seem to understand is that was in response to the way that Zelenskyy kind of started his own way forward. So anyway, we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But first, let's go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance with BAM. BAM is going to lead us in the pledge. So please, if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hat. If you're wearing one, place your hand over your heart and join in with BAM in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you, BAM, for that wonderful rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like to get your rendition played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself performing or reciting the pledge in your style. And then take that audio or video file, whichever it is, attach it to an email, and send it off to fans, F-A-N-S, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online. And I will get you into the rotation. I haven't had a new submission in a while, so it would be nice to get a new submission from some of you folks that are out there that haven't done it yet. That would be great. All right, tonight's headline sponsor is the Institute on the Constitution. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission, and that is to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government, as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following three key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up, and while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's IOTC.AmericanPerspective.online. Or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. Take a look at this wonderful thing. It's 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather wrapped around pages that are water and tear resistant. Not to mention the fact there's no cheap glue here, folks. It goes and it's stitched. The binding is stitched all the way through the leather and the pages. It's got a 100-year warranty against materials and manufacturer defects, such that if you have one of those, you can send it back to the manufacturer and they will either fix it or replace it for free. It has, as my rumblers have all said, sexy rounded corners. And according to 3 Chevy, all Roman numerals are in numerical order and will not poke you in the rear end. Contents are verified as 100% constitutional. See, my rumblers are freaking just writing my script and prose for me. It is buddy tested, buddy approved, Billy tasted, Billy approved, and my youngest whiskey warrior has confirmed that all of the information contained within will help you to obtain your civics badge in scouting. All you need to do is go to constitution.americanperspective.online and get yours today. And of course, while you are there, check out the rest of the Institute on the Constitution's offerings for everything that they have, because it's absolutely fabulous. It is. They do a great job over there, and I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate. All right, let's get down and dirty. So, obviously, the blow up in the Oval Office yesterday was, wait a minute, before I get going too far, I forgot. Oh, gosh, I am so out of practice for whatever reason, I don't know why, but tonight, what's in my glass is Knob Creek, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey number 9. 9 years, age 9 years, and it's empty. Yeah, I got another bottle on the shelf, but there you go. So there you go. My rumblers, they're having a great time. And tonight it is in, wow, I gave it a little extra, folks. You can see the rocks are not just covered. They are like submerged completely. So I gave it a little extra tonight. This is in my Trump 2024 glass for tonight. So there we go. All right. Yes, Becky, it is. Story time. It's time for tonight's On This Day in American History. And of course, for On This Day in American History, the book that I had to go quickly grab from the Post is the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. It is chock full of all kinds of American factoids of this wonderful land that we call home. And of course, tonight is the 1st of March. 1st of March. And we're going to talk real quickly about the national park system. The United States created the world's first national park on March 1st, 1872, when President Ulysses S. Grant signed legislation setting aside Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. Before the century was out, the country had 4 more parks. General Grant, now called Kings Canyon, Sequoia, and Yosemite in California, and Mount Rainier in Washington. By the time the idea of preserving stretches of wilderness was spreading to other countries. Today, the United States has the finest, most extensive system of national parks in the world. From the Thaddeus Kosciuszko National Memorial in Philadelphia, which is 1/50th of 1 acre, to the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve in Alaska, which is 13 million acres. The National Park Service administers more than 84 million acres. The system includes about 400 parks, historical places, monuments, battlefields, preserves, and more. As the conservationist J. Horace McFarland observed, the parks are the nation's pleasure grounds and the nation's restoring places. They are an American idea. Those great parks are, in the highest degree, as they stand today, a sheer expression of democracy. Yellowstone, which lies mostly in the southwest corner of Wyoming but spills into Idaho and Montana, covers some 2.2 million acres that boasts natural wonders such as petrified forests and bubbling pools of colored mud called paint pots, as well as wildlife such as elk, bison, and grizzly bears. The park contains more hot springs and geysers than any other area in the world. In the first part of the 19th century, hunters and trappers returned from the region, describing the place of fire and brimstone with boiling mud and trees made of rock. Accounts at first dismissed as myths. After the Civil War, several expeditions confirmed the stories. Their reports of surreal, spectacular landscape convinced the government to preserve the area as a giant public park. And that, my friends, is tonight's on this day in American history. What a fantastic, story, conversation piece. Now you know a little bit about our parks and about how they started. You can recite that to your friends, dazzle them with a little bit of knowledge and understanding. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this Zelenskyy thing. Now, keep in mind, this Friday Zelenskyy deal was not something that just like showed up out of the blue. I mean, it was a firestorm in the making. All right. So, one of the things that a lot of people seem to forget is that Zelenskyy has been poking and prodding Trump for a little while. I mean, let's face it. He didn't stand up and say anything during Trump's first term, when Trump was being called, or Trump had called him and said, hey, I want you to get rid of, dig up whatever kind of dirt you can on this whole Shilkin deal, on Biden in particular and Biden's business dealings in in Ukraine. He didn't say anything when he probably could have, and rather than just, standing up and just being honest about it, he didn't bother to say a word. And so that's kind of what started, I think, in terms of the long-term situation with the whole Zelenskyy-Trump feud that's going on, was that. And now you have things like the poking and prodding that Trump has done of Zelenskyy himself. For an example, when Trump called Zelenskyy a dictator, which honestly, in a way, Zelenskyy is. Zelenskyy stopped elections and has since been in control of the country, although arguments can be made both ways with regards to what is going on there, in terms of things like, well, he really isn't a dictator. He just stopped elections because of the fact that because of the fact that the war was going on, and it would be really bad to like switch lead horses in midstream. so on and so forth. But also too, during the initial connections and the initial discussions towards the peace, Zelenskyy really has been, shall we say, a bit of a thorn in the side of the Trump admin. So why am I saying this? Well, if you take a look at this piece in the New York Times, Zelenskyy showed his annoyance with the Trump admin all the way back to the meetings where America and Saudi officials went to Riyadh in order to, discuss possible peace agreements. So the United States had an opening meeting with Russian officials back then, and President Zelenskyy lashed out at the Trump administration's negotiating tactics in its harshest terms for excluding the Ukrainians from talks on their own country's fate. So, Trump basically went and, they went to a neutral ground and they started talks with Russia. And he's talking to Russia in particular with regards to the fact that, again, Russia is the aggressor in this situation. And, America is acting as the mediator between Russia and Ukraine. Okay. And so the whole idea of leaving Vladimir Zelenskyy out was probably on purpose, honestly, to keep the talks fairly low-keyed. But Zelenskyy seems to have taken a, shall we say, an exception to this. Okay. And he canceled his trip to the Saudi capital. He said back then, he was like, decisions on how to end the war in Ukraine cannot be made without Ukraine, nor can any conditions be imposed. And he said this from Turkey, where he had traveled as part of a planned tour of the Middle East. Why is he touring the Middle East, by the way? I'm just why would he have done this? But anyway, he goes, we were not invited to this Russian-American meeting in Saudi Arabia. It was a surprise for us. I think many others as well. So he said that Ukraine had learned about the plans for the gathering from the media itself, and he suggested that he had intended to meet American officials after the gathering in the Saudi capital on a previously scheduled state visit to Saudi Arabia. He's like, he said, I don't know who will stay, who will leave, or who is planning to go where. To be honest, I don't care. I don't want coincidences. That's why I will not go to Saudi Arabia. And I'm not quite sure he meant coincidences, to be honest. But the point is that they've been seeking talks, Ukraine has, back then, with the commitment to a membership of NATO, and this is key, to a membership of NATO or keeping peacekeepers in the war zone. Okay. So, yeah, he is also asked, meaning Ukraine, has also asked nations to consider protections for Russian war crimes and reparations for a conflict that has leveled whole cities and killed and wounded tens of thousands of civilians, as well as about 1 million soldiers from both sides. Now, none of that, reportedly, according to the New York Times, was nowhere near the conversation, where American negotiators instead focused on the incredible opportunities that would come from an improved relationship with Moscow, according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, keep in mind, this is the New York Times. Okay. New York Times is leftist. They side with Ukraine, so on and so forth. But anyway, to continue here, Zelenskyy insisted that the terms of any settlement negotiated without Ukraine cannot be imposed on Ukraine. Now, these are these comments that he was making, okay, were basically a representation of a shift where Zelenskyy had tried prior to this to walk a very fine line and avoid actually outright criticizing the Trump administration. Obviously, at the White House in front of the press corps, he threw that out. Okay. He constantly has offered praise, according to the New York Times, in speeches and interviews over the weekend, telling NBC that President Trump could succeed in pressuring Russia into a settlement because Putin feared him, so on and so forth. But he's changed his mind on that, and he sharpened his criticism as the meeting in Saudi Arabia came together. He sharpened his criticism of the negotiating process. Now, he did an interview with a German broadcaster, and Zelenskyy said that the United States was seeking a quick ceasefire by saying things that Putin really likes. Okay. Well, he's already, this was prior to the meeting in the White House. So he's already sitting there starting to feel his oats, let's say. So then he says that the aim of the American negotiators was to move quickly to a presidential summit with Trump and Putin and to announce a truce. But what they want, he said, just a ceasefire is not success. He said that the United States and the European nations should first outline the terms of post-war security in Ukraine, and he has insisted that Russia accept security guarantees to prevent violations or a resumption of the war. Again, this is what he's looking for. He wants to bring Ukraine into NATO. And by the way, with that, what that brings is essentially the idea that anyone who attacks a NATO country, this is Article 5, I think, as a part of the NATO treaty, is that any one country that attacks a NATO joined country, that country now has to fight the entirety of NATO. That's what Ukraine is looking for, honestly. And he keeps talking about security concerns, okay? He keeps talking about security for Ukraine. I think he's missing what Donald Trump is trying to tell him. Number one, Donald Trump has basically flat out said NATO membership for Ukraine is not going to happen. And there's a reason behind that, because if that were to occur, like he said in the Oval Office, in that argument, he's like, hey, or, well, I should say the heated discussion. He said, look, you're looking for World War III, which is exactly what Zelenskyy is looking for. If Zelenskyy can get Ukraine into NATO, that's going to open up the idea that NATO is going to end up fighting Russia. Now, and that will draw the U.S. and Russia into the war. And, next thing you know, we're looking at World War III. And that's what Trump was trying to tell Zelenskyy. You are looking at getting us into World War III, rather than taking a little bit of discretion, being the better part of valor, and understanding the fact that you're not going to win and they're not going to win, and that it's time to just stop. Which is what Trump is attempting to negotiate. So, anyway, Zelenskyy has started to essentially feel his oats a long time before he came to Washington in order to make his presence known, let's say. And so that from that perspective, that's part of the challenge that we have with this whole thing. Okay. Now, we've had some people, some pundits and things like that that have been able to go ahead and give their version or their analysis of what's going on. But one of the biggest things that I think is telling for what Zelenskyy did in the Oval Office in particular is the reaction that was found or that was seen by the Ukrainian ambassador. Okay. The Ukrainian ambassador, her reaction during the talks, she did try to like cover it up, but you can take a look at her reaction here in just a second and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Okay, you'll see what I'm talking about with this. So here is the videotaped reaction as the meeting was occurring. As the meeting was occurring. Take a look at this.
I want to go, and I want this. Look, you can get a ceasefire right now and you take it so the bullets stop flying.
There she is. She's put her head. Oh, she's looking away. She's now put her head in her hands, or in her hand.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named.
Okay, so this is going to play again.
Look, you can get a ceasefire right now and you take it so the bullets stop flying.
And here it is again. Here's the reaction. You can take a look at it for those of you listening on audio. She kind of holds her nose and then she puts her head into her hand, shakes it once, back and forth, like, no. So obviously, Zelenskyy went beyond it. Now, okay, keep in mind the audio on it was really bad because it was from a phone. It was more of just the video part of it that I wanted you to see, not necessarily audio, because it was right at the point where Zelenskyy was talking about essentially all of the things that, you know, that Europe had promised him. Okay. That Europe had promised him, and then he said, basically calling out, you guys saw the video yesterday, calling out Donald Trump or calling out J.D. Vance and saying, you know, what diplomacy? What are we going to get? What diplomacy? And yeah, so anyway, it was just her reaction to it that we really wanted to see. She obviously has been working really hard to try and get this negotiated deal put together. And to be honest, she really was only in the position for a short period of time before the war broke out, and where she was actually basically vaulted or thrust into the position that she is in right now with the entire particular scenario. And, you know, Zelenskyy, I know where Zelenskyy is going. Zelenskyy wants, you know, an end, well, at least he says that he wants an end to the war. Not entirely sure about that, but, you know, whatever it is that he wants, he definitely wants NATO. He wants to be a part of NATO. And he thinks that Donald Trump is going to be able to essentially negotiate with Putin to maybe back off the lines and get back what was taken back in 2014 and subsequently again in 2022, which is Crimea, Donbass, and the areas that have been occupied by the Russian forces. Which again, as I told you, the majority of that area, the population wanted it to be Russians anyway. They didn't want to be Ukrainians. At least that's the reporting that we've been hearing about it. But anyway, well, Zelenskyy came out and apparently was on a couple. Well, first of all, let's go and let's take a look at something here, because Stephen Miller, who's an outspoken individual, okay, outspoken individual when it comes to this stuff, he got on the trail, and he jumped in with Jesse Waters. He was on Jesse Waters' show, and well, let's go ahead and fight on over it. Here is his take of the situation.
There were many remarkable and disturbing things that Zelenskyy said. He repeatedly rejected President Trump's statement that we should pursue a ceasefire.
Right.
How could you reject a ceasefire? And you know, he kept saying Europe's doing so much more than us. Well, then what do you need us for? If he's saying Europe's so great, then why are you coming and begging and pleading to us for money and protection and guarantees? President Trump is a peacemaker. He will fight for peace. He had peace for 4 years under his previous term. And today we saw what it's like to have a strong leader in the White House, and the whole world saw what it's like to have a strong leader for America.
So essentially, I personally think Stephen Miller's right here. I think he's correct. I think that, that Trump is looking to end the war. He wants it to be a peacemaking deal. And, you know, to be honest, what he offered Zelenskyy in the idea of the raw materials and the whole idea of not only the raw materials, but also the veiled promise of security concerns. Because let's be honest, if America has a vested interest in your mining, okay, that honestly is a de facto security call. That is a de facto security assurance, because we have at that point a vested interest in you staying alive. Okay. Well, again, here we go. So, again, Zelenskyy walked out and left the White House without signing that agreement. So Zelenskyy walked away with nothing after this meeting. And he decided to go on a bit of a, obviously, the press got a hold of him. But he decided to go on a little bit of a tour of our press corps. And he showed up on Brett Baer's program on Fox. And during that particular exchange, there were, you know, again, it's kind of interesting how he reacted to all of this scenario. So let's go take a look at this. So here is a clip. Here is a clip of Zelenskyy on Brett Baer's program, and Brett Baer is asking him some questions.
What does Zelenskyy need to do to restart talks with you?
He's got to say, I want to make peace. He doesn't have to stand there and say about Putin this, Putin that, all negative things. He's got to say, I want to make peace. I don't want to fight a war any longer. His people are dying. He doesn't have the cards, just so you understand it, okay? I can tell you. I don't have to tell you that.
Okay, so that was the wrong clip, but that's okay. That'll fit. So Donald Trump, that was Donald Trump outside the White House. The press corps was like basically asking him, hey, what needs to happen for Zelenskyy to be able to come back in and start talking in negotiations? And Donald Trump basically says he wants to have peace. He needs to want peace. And this goes along with what Donald Trump had said prior to, where when he kicked Zelenskyy out of the White House, was that Zelenskyy doesn't want peace. So, I mean, seriously, you know how things go. We all know how things go with this stuff. First, you start with a ceasefire, meaning that negotiations can start and can be worked on. So the ceasefire is the first step toward bringing down the volume or bringing down the temperature in those particular areas. And so why is Zelenskyy not wanting to have a ceasefire? I mean, he had a ceasefire before, he says, but of course, Donald Trump and America wasn't actually in that original conversation. They weren't actually a part of those negotiations. That was something that was done during, Obama and of course Biden. But the big goal here for Trump is literally to get people to stop firing at each other, because he thinks that if he can do that, he believes, as we all should believe it, that negotiations can start occurring at that point. And without a ceasefire, you will not have negotiations. Well, anyway, Zelenskyy, let me get to the clip that I wanted to show you. Zelenskyy goes on Bret Baier's program, and Bret Baier asks a couple of really poignant questions with regards to this whole thing. And here, well, let's just take a listen to what he says.
President Trump said after your meeting that you disrespected him and the vice president and all of America in the Oval Office. Do you think you did? And do you think you owe an apology to President Trump?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the invitation for this dialogue, and good evening to all your country, to all Americans. I'm very thankful to Americans for all your support. You did a lot. I'm thankful to President Trump and to Congress bipartisan support. And I was always very thankful from all our people. You helped us a lot from the very beginning during 3 years of full-scale invasion. You helped us to survive. Anyway, we are strategic partners, and even in such tough dialogue, and I think we have to be very honest, and we have to be very direct to understand each other, because it's for us very necessary to President Trump. And I'm with all respect that he wants to finish this war, but nobody wants to finish more than we, because we in Ukraine, we are in this war, we are in this battle, and battle for freedom, for our lives. So I'm just telling that I think that we have to be on the same side, and I hope that the president on our side together with us, and that is very important to stop Putin. And I heard from President Trump a lot of times that he will stop the war, and I hope he will, and we need to pressure him with Europe, with all the partners. And I think this dialogue had to be a little bit earlier to understand where we are. I don't remember exactly, but President Reagan said that peace is not just an absent the war. Yes, we're speaking about just and lasting peace, about freedom, about justice, about human rights. And that's why I said that I think so, that ceasefire, and Putin, he broken 25 times ceasefire during all these years, 10 years.
So I'm not hearing from you, Mr. President.
Okay. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. he thanked the American people. He thanked the Congress. He thanked everybody kind of but Trump and J.D. Vance. Now, granted, keep in mind that Trump and J.D. Vance haven't really been in office all that long. So you can't really necessarily, blame him for not thanking him for that. But you'll notice that he says he wants the war to end. But he's not sounding all that convincing in my mind. He's not sounding as though he is really convinced of the idea that he wants the war to end. Now that seems pretty harsh and honestly, from his side of the coin, that I would take offense to that if I really weren't in that kind of setup, because again, he's, we're talking about his people, his infrastructure, his country that's been attacked. But yeah, he didn't sound all that convincing to me. Well, then Brett Baier comes out and basically asks the question. He asks the question that I think is on everybody's mind, which is essentially this.
So I'm not hearing from you, Mr. President, a thought that you owe the president an apology.
No, I respect the president and I respect American people. And I think that we have to be very open and very honest, and I'm not sure that we did something bad. I think maybe sometimes some things we have to discuss out of media, with all respect to democracy and to a free media. But there are things where we have to understand the position of Ukraine and Ukrainians, and I think that is the most important thing. Yes, we are partners. We are very close partners. We have to be fair. We have to be very free.
So notice how he deflected the idea of basically apologizing for his lack of actions for that. So yeah. Not exactly sure. Again, I'm not really all that convinced that the man is necessarily feeling very shall we say magnanimous toward Trump right now. I don't think he is. I don't think he wants to apologize. I don't think he, thinks he needs to apologize. Like he said, he doesn't think he did anything wrong. And I also said yesterday during the first initial reactions, where basically when you're coming to ask for money, you don't necessarily, with your hat in hand, you don't necessarily want to piss off the person that you are asking for the money from. You don't need to do that. And, so anyway, well, apparently a Fox reporter, got a tiny bit of a backstory in terms of the regards to what was going on behind the scenes per se. And, she dug up this. And this is, this is from Jackie Heinrich. She dug this up. So the White House officials apparently told Fox that Trump kicked out Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy did not walk off on his own. The rare minerals deal was not signed, which is true. The White House says that Ukrainians were begging to reset. So in other words, that reaction from the Ukrainian ambassador, yeah, that was real. That was real. Okay. And, but Rubio and Waltz, W-A-L-T-Z, informed them that Zelenskyy needs to leave the White House grounds and return when he is ready for peace. The president and U.S. officials felt disrespected by Zelensky's rhetoric and demeanor. They cited that he was shrugging and rolling his eyes during the conversation. Okay. And they basically, the quote that she has here was, when I went to the upper press to ask what was going on, the lunch that Trump and Zelensky were supposed to dine on and talk over was sitting in the hallway. And she was told, apparently, that White House staffers, press office staffers, will be eating that lunch. So, yeah, Trump really was a little bit pissed. Okay. It also, notice too, that it also says that Ukrainians were begging to reset. They were begging to reset. And this kind of leads us into the whole idea of what happened afterward, where Zelensky went to X and was like, shall we say, apologizing without apologizing. I mean, he wasn't really apologizing, but he did post a couple things on X. For an example, he posted, "We are very grateful to the United States for the support. I'm thankful to President Trump, Congress for their bipartisan support, and American people. Ukrainians have always appreciated his support, or this support, especially during the 3 years of full-scale invasion." And he has a picture of his Brett Baer interview that he had. But the thing about it is there's a lot of people who are asking, what in the heck was he thinking during this? So nobody outside of Zelensky really understands what Zelensky was thinking. So keep in mind, this particular meeting was not a situation where Donald Trump was actually, being mean to Zelensky. He was very cordial. He met him, shook his hand, brought him into the White House, was like, hey, this is cool, blah, blah, blah. And then they go and they sit down in front of the press corps. And apparently Zelensky seems to think that maybe this is a good place because he might have been insulated by that press corps. That he apparently felt that this was a great place for him to start showing that he has the, shall we say, stones to stand up to both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Now, he started off going after J.D. And it appears to be that J.D. Vance was, by mentioning diplomacy being the ends of the war, was where Zelensky took offense at the suggestion. And that's where he started saying things like, well, Putin invaded. Putin's the one. And Europe promised us peace and promised us a ceasefire, and we didn't get it. And all of these kinds of things. And that's when Trump, who actually left it to run, by the way, and Trump basically allowed it to go on longer than it probably should have been. But Trump, of course, you got to understand where he's coming from. Trump's never said that Ukraine is doing the United States any kind of favors by fighting against Russia. And he has tried to use, Zelensky, that is, has tried to use that as a reason for America to just keep sending money. Now, his predecessor, Trump's predecessor, may very well have found that argument a tasteful one, but of course he's not president anymore. And Zelensky also, too, keep in mind, has been talking about what's fair. Well, fair doesn't really count in this, because realistically, what would be fair is that, yeah, Russia would leave and, leave the area and you'd go back to where you were and everything would be cool. But we're beyond that now. We're totally beyond that now. And so Trump, of course, and having this press conference, which, again, I personally think it was kind of it might have been a calculating move on Trump's idea, to be honest with you. It might have been a calculating move, but I don't think it was a very good idea. And it was definitely not a very good idea for Zelenskyy to try and use the press as sort of a shield against it. Now, keep in mind, Trump has already kind of acquiesced. This is another thing that the mainstream media doesn't seem to be talking about, in the fact that he's largely done a very friendly, Ukraine-friendly deal, including lowering the repayment amount for the money that we've been giving them to just $90 billion. Now, here's the thing. The negotiations were over at this point. Why? Why would you go and take and choose this particular spot to decide to grow some stones and try to hold Trump and J.D. Vance, who, by the way, they don't even really give a crap that the press was there, to be honest with you. Okay. But, if they had, or if they had cared, then, and honestly, JD actually was trying to end the press conference and get to a point where they could have these discussions in private, by the way. But it didn't happen because Zelenskyy decided to push the envelope. And I can tell you that's one thing that you don't do with Trump or with JD. You don't push the envelope. Again, the negotiations were over. They had already agreed to a deal. His purpose in being at the White House was not to stir the pot. His purpose was to sign the deal. And believe me, had he signed the deal, it wasn't even set in stone, by the way. If you even read the deal, none of it was really set in stone. All it was more of a promissory note from Ukraine. Hey, you know what? We're going to promise you, this is America, we're going to promise you arms in return. You're going to give us, essentially, if you think about it, first dibs on any rare earth materials and minerals to come back, okay, to us. But that'll be at a later date, because we're gonna partner with you in mining. We're gonna help you. We're basically gonna send, American people over there. We're gonna help you sort of rebuild. We're going to do what America has always done whenever we've gotten into a war with somebody. And that's essentially, we're going to help you rebuild and become a better version of yourself coming out of it. Okay. Well, Scott Jennings, who I'm telling you is just, I love this guy. I really do. I love him. In fact, if it was just Scott Jennings, I probably would watch CNN anyway. I don't want to watch CNN at all. But yeah. Anyway, here's Scott Jennings was, on CNN with another, frankly, a liberal leftist. Okay. And Scott, well, let's just take a listen and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I don't know if he needs an apology. He needs Zelenskyy to recognize the position that he's in.
Which to you is what?
We're their patron. We're their best hope for the killing to stop and for them to emerge from this sovereign and prosperous. And we're also their best hope as a business partner. I mean, all Zelenskyy had to do today was put on a tie, show up, smile, say thank you, sign the papers, and have lunch. That's it. And he couldn't do that. And this followed 10 days of being difficult in private and now 1 day of being stupid in public. This did not have to go down this way.
Okay.
And however you feel about why it started, why it's going on, who's right and who's wrong, we can help them in this and come out okay on the other side, and he's making it hard.
Now, first of all, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I actually agree with Scott. And everything that he said was basically right.
Wow.
I know. I'm going to get killed on social media for admitting that, but so be it.
Follow through on something, and he is not.
Yeah,
so that was his point.
I have a short answer on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the short answer is the Trump administration believes that if Ukraine goes into business with the United States, that in and of itself is a security guarantee. If your interests become our interests, we're going to be interested in making sure our interests are secure. So it would have been wise for him to understand the economic deal, the mineral deal, is a security guarantee in and of itself. And he lost sight of that today in the argument.
Premeditated. I don't know.
I think Zelenskyy misplayed it in the room. And you can, and we could disagree about J.D. Vance's position on it or agree on it. But either way, Zelenskyy certainly had been briefed on what the right way to handle this was. And all he had to do was walk in there and say, thank you. I'm really grateful to be here. We want to be partners with the United States. We're grateful for your leadership. Where's the papers? And what are we having for lunch? That's all he had to do. And look, the posturing doesn't have to occur now. If he is serious about wanting peace and ending this war, you don't have to keep posturing as a tough guy. Everybody knows you're tough, all right? The Ukrainians are tough. They're brave. They're fighting a much larger country. Everybody knows. The question for Zelenskyy is, can you take off the military uniform and put on the uniform of diplomacy? He failed the test today.
So obviously that was a couple of different clips kind of spliced together for that. And by the way, I want to thank the Bongino report for that that clip put together. But Scott is right. Scott is correct in this. That is exactly what Zelenskyy was supposed to do. That is exactly what Zelenskyy should have done walking into the White House, is just, thank you. That's it. Thank you. Where's the papers? Let me sign it. Let's have lunch and I'll fly home. That's it. Zelenskyy screwed this up. And I'm seeing some of my rumblers in the chat who are fantastically informed, all talking about the possibility that Zelenskyy could have been pushed into potentially doing what he did by possibly some people here in this country. But before I get to that, I need to get a spot read put in. So we'll pick this up in just a moment. For right now, let's talk about wait, what? What? What in the heck? Let's try this again. There we go. All right. So let's talk about Rumble Premium. So this particular sponsorship is from Rumble, one that is incredibly important to the survival of the company. When Rumble first started in 2013, they built the platform for the small creator. They didn't censor or have biases, and they were fair and treated all creators equally. I can tell you they pretty much have from my side. No one thought platforms would censor political conversation or censor opinions about COVID. Well, they did. I can tell you because I was one of those people. YouTube cut me off. At one point, they removed a couple of my videos. And Facebook admitted that they felt the pressure from the Biden-Harris administration and fell to that pressure. Rumble themselves did not. They held the line. They are attacked daily for giving us a voice to talk to you. They are attacked in corporate media. They are attacked by governments like France. They are attacked from brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech. Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive with brand advertisers. They don't get that much of it. Watching our show on Rumble is the most they can ask from you. But if you really believe in this fight, and if you have the means, one major way you can help Rumble and shows like mine survive is by joining Rumble Premium. Join the community that believes in the First Amendment and believes in our human right to free speech. Rumble is offering $10 off with the promo code STUDIO, that's STUDIO, when you purchase an annual subscription. Go to rumble.com/premium. For those of you that don't know, the / is the question mark key. Go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO. That's capital STUDIO. All of them capitals. Like I said, if you have the means and believe in the cause, now is the time to join Rumble Premium. If you don't have the means, that's fine. We're just happy if you watch us on Rumble. So once again, go to rumble.com. That's rumble.com/premium, PREMIUM, and use the promo code STUDIO to get $10 off when you purchase a full annual subscription. Go to rumble.com/premium, use the promo code STUDIO for $10 off your annual subscription. And again, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, as well as Rumble thanks you as well. All right. So there's been some question as to where in the hell Zelenskyy got the idea, because obviously if you looked at the Ukrainian ambassador, this was not what she was expecting to occur in the Oval Office. Well, there's some indication that maybe there was some outside influence that might have pushed Zelenskyy to do what he did. Here in Breitbart, Democrats, never Trumpers, inflated Zelenskyy's arrogance before the Oval Office disaster. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying this is 100% for sure. However, there are some interesting posts from people like Shifty Schiff, Adam Schiff out of California, who basically stated, today there will be a critical meeting in the White House with the leader of the free world. Donald Trump will also be there. So in other words, Schiff is essentially indicating that Zelenskyy is the leader of the free world. Yeah. Schiff also posted, a hero and a coward are meeting in the Oval Office today. And when the meeting is over, the hero will return to Ukraine. Essentially indicating in that particular case, well, that Donald Trump's the coward. So, yeah, especially because Zelenskyy is on X, don't think that he doesn't see these kinds of things and think that he may have, the calling of the American people, I guess. Anyway, never Trump Republicans such as former Representatives Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney have constantly attacked Trump as Putin's puppet and have assured Ukraine that Ukraine itself would have the flow of money that they kept regardless. So, yeah. Anyway, when Zelenskyy was criticizing Trump, which I talked to you in the first part of the episode here in the media last week, he was not simply mounting an assertive defense of his country's interests or perhaps revealing his own innate arrogance. He was also reflecting the prejudice of the Democrats and the never-Trumpers who have long held contempt for Trump and have spread that feeling abroad. So, again, he may have been looking at some other public media. He may have communicated with some anti-Trump folks. He may have communicated with people in the Democrat Party who essentially encouraged him to do this. I mean, believe me, don't get me wrong. He probably, still has contacts with certain people in Congress who not only went over there during the Biden administration and also, who knows, they may even be a part of the accounts payable section for it. So, yeah. Anyway, even Politico and their playbook kind of has more of a tone of, Zelenskyy might have screwed up here. Even they say things like the disastrous Oval Office meeting was heard around the world, that Washington and Europe are still reeling from it, that Vladimir Zelenskyy offered a testy defense of his war-torn country when responding to J.D. Vance. And that Zelenskyy had gone to X to do some thanking. Because, again, J.D. Vance asked him, have you ever thanked any of us? So again, it's this is not exactly the best look for Zelenskyy, for Vladimir Zelenskyy, in terms of all of this. And realistically, all he needs to do, to be completely honest, is to essentially bow his head, fall on the sword, like he's been doing a lot, and essentially say, you know what, Mr. Trump, President Trump, you do offer me a way out. And I think that that this is definitely something that we need to be able to do. But do you think he's going to do it? Nah, I don't think so. All right. So let's move on. There's plenty enough of that where that came from, but let's move on. So, on the topic of the Epstein release, okay, Liz Wheeler was one of the people that received one of those notebooks, okay, and she essentially got onto Glenn Beck's podcast and was talking about the meat behind what a lot of people have said that is essentially a nothing burger. So Wheeler, of course, took the heat after Pam Bondi kind of overpromised and then, of course, underdelivered. Now, keep in mind, okay, this entire situation, first of all, they did say that this was just phase one. That this isn't everything. But at the same time, though, it sure seemed like it was not up to the hype about the entire thing. Okay. Now, Wheeler talked on the show, on Beck's show, where she discussed that the White House's hours-long reporting prohibition, known as an embargo, and the events that primed the pump for what was essentially considered now a new wave of suspicion. She also addressed the apparent open rebellion underway at the FBI. And Wheeler said that what happens from here on out is actually the important part. We have now identified that there are people trying to subvert the president from within the FBI. And this is absolutely true. Wheeler added, as a part of the interview, what happens from this moment forward actually sets the course for the rest of the administration. I'm not quite sure I agree with her on that necessarily, but okay. Anyway, she says, and signals to deep staters in administrative agencies whether they can defy the president and the attorney general and the FBI director and get away with it or not. So, one of the things that did occur was that Bondi, of course, she advocated for it. She advocated for it to be, released. She also sat there and essentially heightened the anticipation by suggesting that the list was on her desk, that the release was imminent. They brought Wheeler and 14 other prominent conservative media figures invited to the White House, given no indication as to the nature or the reason for the visit. After meeting with several cabinet officials, Wheeler said that she and others met with Bondi and the FBI Director Kash Patel and each were provided with a binder labeled the Epstein Files Phase 1. Chad Prather was actually part of that as well. Okay. Now, despite what a lot of people thought about, and they were all kind of excited about it, in the fact that the binder might contain new and previously unreleased and consequential information, Bondi also related or lamented in a public statement that the first phase of declassified files largely contains documents that have been previously leaked but never released in a formal capacity by the U.S. government. You know, a lot of these people are like, okay, this really isn't exactly the best way for you to go and release this thing. Well, they went ahead and did it. And the way that they did it sort of was anticlimactic. And I think that's part of the problem that everybody is having with this entire thing. It tells us what we already knew for the most part, but it does give us a further information in terms of the magnitude of the victims of the Epstein case. There are a few pages in there that, even though they are redacted, they do show that there's something like 250 names of, quote, masseuses that are a part of the Epstein ring. And so even though it didn't reveal anything major, it still gave us at least a little bit more of an inkling as to what's potentially could be uncovered. But the question that a lot of people are asking about is that what else is going to come out and when? And here's the thing. Even if something does come out later on down the road, you need to understand that, as far as, and I'm sort of talking to the president and his administrative staff here, okay, is that if phase 2 does not contain new, unredacted, and relevatory information within it, your credibility is going to be gone. Okay? It's going to be gone. And that's the problem. Because what we are looking at here is the credibility of the Trump administration now, and being able to deliver and promise on deliver on the promise that you have been given us. Okay? Ideally, and in particular, as Glow points out in all caps, the names of the predators. Now, to be honest, do I really care one way or the other, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, or, you know, whether or not it was Hollywood or somebody else? No, I really don't. I really don't care as far as that goes. But I can tell you what I do care about is whose names are on the list. Not that they were Democrats or Republicans, that they were part of Congress, not part of Congress, or even part of the Supreme Court. Or again, even part of Hollywood. None of that matters. What does matter is the individuals who are being named. And the more important piece is, what is going to happen to those individuals who have been named? That's the key. That's the key. So sitting here and pretending that you're going to leak something specifically, okay, and that it was going to be something revelatory and, revolutionary, revelating, whatever you want to call it, to sit there and hype it up and then have it turn into basically nothing? Well, that is what was the cause of people getting mad about the whole thing. Now, Wheeler told Beck as a part of that conversation, she was like, People are very mad about what happened yesterday, and honestly, I don't blame them for being mad. I'm also very mad about what happened because we all expected to get the dirtiest dirt we have ever gotten. Yeah. So, anyway, so the whole key out of all of this is going to be, when is the next release going to happen? And how soon is it going to happen? Now, there's something like 2,000 pages that the New York office, FBI office, neglected to pass along. So we're going to have to see what happens with the entire situation. But again, I think the part of the biggest part about all of this was all of the hype leading up to it, then the embarrassment, and now we're back to the same old thing where none of these people, none of the individuals involved, because one of the reasons that we voted you in, Trump and JD, was essentially to ensure that justice comes back, that justice, blind and equal justice, comes back to America again. This, honestly, is not providing a very good feeling, considering the fact that you've been doing so well in all kinds of other areas for it. Anyway. All right. Let's see here. Well, not that this really matters, but my mom's probably going to get mad at me here. Why are you still talking about this guy? Anyway, President Trump apparently revealed a little bit about a conversation that he and Joe Biden had on a private, it was a private conversation that he had after his election victory in 2024 with Biden. And this was reported by the New York Post. Apparently, at least according to Trump, Biden didn't blame Kamala Harris. Instead, he pointed fingers at Barack Obama and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So Trump did this where he recalled a visit to the White House where he met with Biden, who is apparently, according to Trump, irate. And this is during an interview with the Spectator World. The former president, who had been pushed out of the Democrat ticket due to concerns over his age and declining abilities, was reportedly fuming about it. Trump said, I asked him, I said, who do you blame? Because he was very angry, you know, he was a very angry guy. And he said, I blame Barack. According to Trump, Biden's frustration didn't stop there. He said, and I also blame Nancy Pelosi. I said, what about the vice president? He said, no, I don't blame her, which was kind of interesting. He didn't blame Harris. He told me he blamed those two people. Well, of course he blamed those two people. We know on the outside, Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi orchestrated the entire thing. Okay? He orchestrated the entire thing. Kamala Harris was just the token, probably the last nail in the coffin for the whole thing, because they probably, more than likely, would have looked at Joe and said, hey, we're going to 25th you if you don't go along with this. So anyway. All right. One last article here before we get to the question of the week. So, everybody's talking about groceries going up and everything else. And believe me, I know some people, I'm not going to call them my brethren, but people in the South that I've met over time. They're all, shall we say, very creative with the types of things that they eat. I've seen, squirrel and possum and things like that on the menu. Frog legs, which may or may not be all that exotic. Well, apparently I caught this and I thought this would be an interesting way to kind of finish this off. Finish tonight's off. This in Yahoo News. Apparently there is now a new animal possibly on the list. Conservationists are actually hoping that hunters will help eradicate. The federal government is now begging people to eat this massive harmful rodent species known as the nutria. The nutria. Now, for those of you who are on the audio portion of the program, the picture that you see here is of something that appears to be akin to a beaver. So maybe with the chicken problem that we're having with chicken eggs, maybe you can go and trap and shoot nutrias. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is now actively urging people in America to fill their bellies with this invasive species that are wreaking havoc across habits in the country. Okay. So as part of its National Invasive Species Awareness Week, which ended yesterday, I think, the agency released a list of five invasive creatures that they are actively encouraging people to hunt and eat as a way to protect native species. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wrote in a public advisory released late last week that some of the biggest ecological nightmares are critters that don't belong here. Invasive species outcompete native wildlife, destroy habitats, and mess up ecosystems. But rather than just complaining about them, let's put them on the menu. So the top of the list is the nutria, which is a large water-loving rodent that resembles a beaver without the trademark flat tail. Nutria are native to the swamps of South America, and apparently they were brought to the U.S. by fur traders in the 1930s, and many of them were released into the wild after the market for the nutria fur died. Or dried up, I should say. Since then, nutria have been a menace in marshlands in several regions of the country, particularly along the Gulf Coast, but also along the Atlantic coast and in the Pacific Northwest and parts of California. So here's a map from the U.S. Geological Survey that shows you where the nutria are at. Now I'm going to tell you the big red area that's over in the northwest side of the country, okay? I don't know of too many people that are really going to be interested in helping this out, but as you can see, it's a very concentrated area, okay? And yeah, so for those of you who live in the South, in Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, some of those places. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, go ahead and go after them, please. Anyway, so the article continues on here and says the nutria is a perfect example of how introduction of an invasive species can throw off the delicate balance that has developed inside vulnerable ecosystems over centuries of evolution. So they're apparently voracious herbivores that can consume up to a quarter of their body weight in a single day. They eat so much that they can devastate local plant species that keep the marshlands stable. So The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wrote in a Facebook post, their nonstop munching and burrowing destroy the plants that keep marshes stable, leading to erosion, loss of habitat, and wetlands that look like something out of a disaster movie. Anyway. Government conservatives are apparently hoping that the appeal of a tasty meal might encourage local hunters to support their anti-nutria campaign. They even came out with a cookbook. There was a cookbook that was published in 1963 that listed nearly 24 nutria recipes. So, yeah. Including chicken fried nutria and macaroni nutria casserole. The state of Louisiana apparently has even shared a recipe for smoked nutria and andouille sausage gumbo. Anyway, the U.S. Department of Agriculture recognizes more than 200 invasive species that exist throughout the country. That list includes animals, sea creatures, bugs, plants, and even viruses. Most of the entries are either inedible or unappealing to eat. So apparently, these guys could possibly have some sort of a use, money-wise or food-wise. I guess if you get into a survival situation, I now have a new, because I live in the Pacific Northwest, I now have a new target rather than just salivating over the rabbits. Oh, maybe I should grab a couple of these, cookbooks just to see what the heck is going on. All right, let's get on with it. All right, let's get on with the question of the week. And tonight's question of the week comes to us via Buddy Weiser. Buddy always has some really good questions. So let's see what tonight's question is. Tonight's question comes from him, and he says, greetings to you on this Saturday, Mr. Whiskey. I hope this note finds you healthy and smiling. Well, after that last thing, I'm laughing. I don't know about the healthy part, but whatever. He says, I have 2 inquiries for you as follows. Has a non-attorney ever been nominated or confirmed and placed on SCOTUS? And he asks, if you, meaning me, were president and had to nominate a non-attorney for SCOTUS on Monday, who would it be? And he goes, thank you, Buddy Weiser. Well, buddy, I'm going to be honest with you on the second question. I really don't have any idea. However, that being said, I know of a couple people that I would love to nominate, although they are actual lawyers. But here's the thing. You don't need a law degree to be on SCOTUS. In fact, if you read the Constitution, there's not even any mention of any kind of education, nor is there any mention of any kind of age requirement like what you have, or any state, residency requirements either. Okay. There's hardly any requirements because, as I've told you in the past, Article 3 was like the last article that was actually written technically for the Constitution before those people ran off. They were done. They were already there at like 90 some odd days, and they were tired of being there. And so they sort of like comprised Article 3 as they were walking out the door. So anyway, and yes, buddy, that isn't the question you just sent, but that was a question that was sent 2 or 3 weeks ago that I'm just now getting around to. But anyway, there was some question with regards to when Elena Kagan in particular was nominated and confirmed as a part of the Supreme Court, because she, while she had a law degree, she did not have any judicial experience, or hardly any judicial experience on the situation. So again, there's no requirements. There's none. Now, that being said, you have to get through a Senate confirmation hearing, and the majority of the Senate would probably be picking you apart if you didn't have a law degree or some such training. But you also have to remember, too, we didn't really have law degrees, at least not in the way that we do today, back in the day. Okay. There are a few who were not law degrees or law degreed individuals. Okay. And there was also actually a couple people who were appointed being young as well as not having a formal law degree. So the last justice, according to the information that I've found, the last justice that did not have a law degree was Stanley Reed. He served on the court from 1938 to 1957. He never finished his formal legal studies. However, he did gain admission to the bar and was a practicing lawyer. Okay. So you could kind of argue the question as to whether or not they were a lawyer versus having a law degree, what qualifies as a lawyer, so on and so forth. Okay. But this guy apparently did not have a law degree. Now, to keep in mind, the whole process of like passing the bar and everything else, that's a modern thing. Back when you were to be a lawyer, all you had to do was actually read up on the law. Traditionally, you didn't have any formal training. Most lawyers only read law texts. That was it. That was what made you a lawyer. And so, you know, yeah, it's kind of an interesting scenario. That being said, okay, the following people who were justices, and there's a bunch of them, who were actually not lawyers, meaning that they studied, but they failed to graduate, were as follows: Henry Billings Brown, Melville Fuller, William Henry Moody, George Shiraz Jr., Benjamin N. Cardozo, Joseph McKenna, Stanley Foreman Reed, Robert H. Jackson, and James Wilson. Those are all people who were justices, but they were not technically lawyers because they studied, but they never graduated. Now, this list of people were self-taught, but were practicing lawyers, and that was James F. Burns, Samuel Chase, John Hessen Clark, James Iredell, and Thomas Johnson. So, historically speaking, there have been plenty who would not be considered lawyers in today's world. And that is correct. Yes, the Constitution doesn't require it, so therefore anybody could be. If I were to nominate somebody, it would have to be somebody, honestly, who knows the Constitution inside and out, is a student of the Constitution, and would be essentially a person with the ethics and integrity to follow the Constitution. I would think that perhaps with further questioning, the gentleman by the name of Paul Engel, E-N-G-E-L, who has done a lot of constitutional study, might be on the list for someone who is not a lawyer, who would be potentially a nominee of mine, had I been president, to the Supreme Court. But again, whoever would end up being on that list would definitely have to be, in my mind, a strict constitutionalist and an adherence, and desiring an adherence to the constitutional law. All right, folks, that is it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't If you haven't done so already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. And once you are there, make sure that you sign up, sign in, and find and follow the American Perspective channel by hitting that green follow button. And you'll get notified every time I go live. Also, too, before you take off, don't forget to hit those thumbs up and like buttons across all of my platforms, whether it's X, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, the aforementioned Rumble. We will see you on Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.